In the 1980 classic Stanley Kubrick film, The Shining, based on the Stephen King novel of the same name, a family moves to the remote Overlook Hotel to become its caretakers.
Here's Johnny.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up.
Jack, a writer and recovering alcoholic, is trying and failing to become a better father and husband. All the while, his son Danny and wife Wendy live in this simmering, poorly hidden fear of provoking him, holding on as the hotel's ominous presence drives Jack to madness. The Overlook is not just the place where this story happens. It isn't interchangeable with any other hotel. It hides deeper truths, sometimes spelled out to the audience and sometimes only implied. It has a dark, violent past, mirroring the implication of Jack's own. It changes over time, becoming more restless and eager for its next victims, its next meal. But it also changes the characters, causing Jack himself to spiral inwards, making us question whether the hotel is actually haunted or if his isolation in the place is forcing him to stew in his guilt, driving him back to drinking. The Overlook Hotel isn't modular to the story in the same way that Jack, Wendy, and Danny aren't. To replace one of them is to change the entire story itself. And in this way, the Overlook Hotel is a character, one just as real and visceral as the others. This idea of viewing a story setting as a character isn't anything new. Avatar's Pandora and Tolkien's Middle-earth are a couple of other great examples to view through this lens. Just like any other character, Middle-earth evolves along with the Fellowship. It affects each of them with a spectrum of emotions, and ultimately, because of their journey through this living, breathing world, the characters are irrevocably changed. And Pandora glows at night. Setting as character is famously used in film noir as well, to give a sense of a city alive at night. It's spelled out pretty plainly in the opening lines of the 1948 film, The Naked City.
It's 1 o'clock in the morning on a hot summer night. And this is the face of New York when it's asleep. Or as nearly asleep as any city ever is. There is a pulse to a city, and it never stops beating.
Just a warning, what follows will absolutely spoil the hell out of Season 1 of Scavengers Reign. You should definitely watch it first, as it's one of the best, most creative series to come out in a while. In many ways, Scavengers Reign is just an extension of those film noir ideas of a place being intrinsically alive, sometimes manifesting this very literally in the show. The story is set on the planet Vesta, an alien world teeming with life in utter abundance and with characteristics that really emphasize that word, alien. Each and every life form is more otherworldly than the last, from benign creatures like Swole Gumby or the flippy coin thing that does exactly that, to the downright horrific glowing pods that clone their victims into a Trojan horse, which replaces the original, then explodes, killing and dissolving the herd and utilizing it as fertilizer for the seeds to spread in the explosion. It's one of the most creative metal things I've witnessed in a TV show, and it's only one of many in the season. Scavengers Reign is an adaptation of an animated short released in 2016 titled simply Scavengers. It was created by the two showrunners, Charles Huttner and Joe Bennett, who later adapted it into the full series, to be picked up by Adult Swim and eventually Max. In Scavengers, it was much more clear how big a character Vesta is, because by comparison, the two protagonists in the short have very little characterization and zero dialogue throughout the entire 7.5-minute runtime. It follows two unnamed characters, clear prototypes of Ursula and Sam, as they work their way through this Rube Goldberg style of organic machine, utilizing all the ecological relationships on Vesta, all just to simulate going home for themselves in this kind of living VR. While it was clear that translating this to a full series was going to require a lot of work, the key idea, in Bennett's estimation, was
to bring as much of those multi-layered symbiotic relationships and all of the fauna and flora, everything that exists there, to try to have it be as similar and rich as what existed in the short.
And I'd say that not only did they succeed in that goal, their creation has something much more profound to say about humanity and its relationship with nature than the short did. There are 5 protagonists in the show: Ursula, Levi, Ozzy, Cayman, and Sam. The premise is simple. Each is a survivor of a shipwreck, and they had to escape via pod to the nearest planet, Vesta. Each of them is trying in their own ways to make it back home, though they're all scattered across a wide region on the planet. We see Vesta through their eyes, their philosophies, and their biases. Now, despite what the show's title might imply, the 5 are absolutely not in control of their environment. They each have a different relationship with it, and they are, at the best of times, learning to utilize Vesta and coexist with it. But any attempt to force the world to bow to the whims of humans is immediately rejected and punished. The story is very man versus nature, and each of the characters represent a differing philosophy on how best to approach that conflict. So let's explore them a bit. Just FYI, I'm expanding upon some ideas from this fantastic analysis on Reddit, which I'll link below. Cayman, the loner, decides it's best to submit to Vesta, more specifically to Hollow, the mind-controlled frog creature. He's shown to be a very petty, sour man, ambitious yet too cowardly to take responsibility for his actions. He wanted power but wasn't prepared for the backlash that taking power would bring. So instead, he allows himself to be controlled by Hollow, becoming a party to the actions, but shrugging off any of the guilt or self-loathing that it entails because he wasn't in control. He realizes that he has no hope in surviving on his own, let alone conquering life on Vesta. So instead, he chooses to give himself completely to it. Now, the other 4 begin the story in pairs, and this allows us to see how their evolving perspectives and philosophies throughout the season serve as the foil to their partners. First, we have Ursula and Sam. These 2 really embody the title of the show. They are true scavengers. As if to demonstrate the fact, the series starts with them piecing together equipment to call the remains of their ship down to the planet. Yet they have also, in a short span of time that almost stretches credulity, learned to utilize life on Vesta as tools. For instance, the lights that they brutally pull from the inside of a forest creature, or the gas mask buddies, or the little escape balloons. All of it really shows how resourceful the 2 of them are from the start. However, we slowly learn that they differ in the way that they view these discoveries and life on Vesta as a whole. Sam tries to avoid thinking about it if at all possible. He uses what he needs, but has no curiosity beyond that. He doesn't really respect the environment or the creatures, and is often punished for this behavior. He is stuck in the old world, refusing to change. On the other hand, Ursula, the biologist, has a healthy respect and almost admiration for Vesta's ecosystem. Multiple times throughout the series, she's shown to be downright captivated with its beauty, with a healthy dose of caution thrown in there. The final 2 are Ozzy and Levi. Ozzy ends up very similar to Ursula in her views on the ecosystem, so it's not surprising that she is one of the characters that survives the first season. The difference is that where Ursula seems fascinated with Vesta, she still keeps herself apart from it. She uses it to her advantage, trying to maintain the place of humanity at the top of the food chain. Ozzy, on the other hand, adapts herself to become part of Vesta, in a way. Not in a literal sense, as that spot is already taken by Levi. Instead, rather than fighting to be at the top of the hierarchy, Ozzy finds her place within it, allowing herself to be guided by the planet, quite literally in the case of the wildebeest creature's stampede. Levi instead chooses, or is sort of thrust into, the path of complete integration with the planet. They are a robot, starting the series as a total automaton with no sentience to speak of. Yet very shortly after arriving, they begin to change, to be changed by Vesta. Much like the moon of Pandora from Avatar, there are signs that all of life on Vesta is connected in some way, though it's much less clear on the specifics. We'll talk about that more in a bit, but this connection via a yellow fungal growth that infiltrates Levi's circuitry begins to make them into an individual. They are completely changed by the end of the series, both physically and psychologically, following their destruction at the hands of Hollow and their subsequent rebirth. They are baptized in the brutality of the planet, so to speak, but also shown its mercy. In each of their cases, the planet has changed the character, affected them down to the core of who they are as people. This is something that we don't typically see from a place, at least not in this dramatic a fashion. That's often the domain of other characters. But Scavengers Reign blurs the line between the two in such interesting ways, and I'd like to explore that if you'd indulge me. In her blog, author Catherine Cowley lays out some criteria for a setting to come alive as a character in its own right. Bear in mind that this is just one author's opinion and shouldn't be treated as rules set in stone. Rather, we'll use them as a jumping-off point. According to Cowley, the setting must 1. Play an active part in the story, 2. Impact multiple plot points throughout the story, 3. Carry a larger metaphorical role that is present throughout the narrative. 4. Be vibrant like a living organism and have the potential for change. 5. Receive the sort of attention from characters that is normally reserved for people. And 6. Not be a manifestation of a single character or a small group of characters. Well, we can easily check off number 4 from that list. Vesta is absolutely teeming with life and character, and as we mentioned, seemingly alive as a whole. Each of the creatures is really just an extension of the greater will of the planet. The life that Huttner and Bennett imagined is some of the most creative that I've ever seen in a show. It's much like a 2D Pandora, but whereas that moon evokes mostly just a sense of awe and wonder, there is a more pervasive, deadlier side to Vesta that Avatar really only flirted with. Take, for instance, the puffball monster. There's this scene in episode 4 where Ozzy and Levi find a refuge within a sort of terrarium, a seemingly isolated ecosystem all to itself. The area looks friendly and inviting, and hey, there's even these happy little cotton candy looking balls floating around. It's all very innocuous, until one of them sticks to Avi, then Minnie. And then she realizes in horror that they are releasing some sort of paralytic agent, that she can't move. And that's when a pile of puffballs off to the side that we probably didn't look twice at rises up and reveals itself to be a ruthless insectoid predator. Though she comes out mostly unscathed from the encounter, save for some nasty-looking rashes, it's only because Levi is able to come back online and punch the creature back into a spray of puffballs, which really raises a litany of questions about the creature, but we don't have time for that. Regardless, the experience forces Ozzy to change, to begin thinking of Levi as more than just a souped-up dishwasher. She doesn't like the idea, but Vesta isn't really giving her a choice. Levi wants their bodily autonomy acknowledged, and Ozzy needs Levi to survive, so...
Okay, Levi. I won't do it again.
It's not all predatory beasts in danger, though. In the following episode, Ozzy finds these strange bird fountain-looking plants, which are ecosystems unto themselves, and host their own fish species. She learns, accidentally, that the fish somehow eat the rash, but are otherwise unharmful, leaving her skin fresh and clear. Then she lets go of her ego and allows herself to become one with a wildebeest horde, allowing their movement to guide her Tron bike, swaying back and forth with the mass, going with the flow rather than trying to forge her own way through. Now, each of the scenes I mentioned demonstrates to Ozzy that she cannot be truly separate from Vesta's ecosystem, at least not if she hopes to come out of this journey unscathed. The characterization of Vesta isn't just limited to flora and fauna either. The environment itself plays its own role when extreme weather thrusts choices upon the characters. In episode 2, titled The Storm, the characters are all caught in this extreme razor hurricane that forces them out of the relative stasis that they had been in up to that point. Cayman has to go into the hollow creature's lair for shelter, the first major step in becoming its slave/symbiote/parasite. Ozzy and Levi have to leave the outpost that they had so carefully set up when they realize that the storm is too strong even for those well-built structures. Finally, Ursula and Sam are caught in the open with no protection. They quickly realize that the danger isn't just strong winds, but this razor-sharp crystalline material that seemingly spreads when coming in contact with the flesh. The weather is physically trying to change them. This catalyst is the first major divergence between the two characters' philosophies. Ursula's inquisitive nature leads her to discovering the sea cow egg thingies, and intuiting that they could pose as eggs to get out of danger. However, Sam wants no part of it. While he has used Vesta to his advantage in the past, it was always on his terms, and only when he was in total control. Instead, he wants to try finding a cave or some other shelter to hide out in, a choice that would likely have doomed them both because it didn't appear there were any nearby. All of these are examples of Vesta as an agent of change, an actor in the play just as vibrant and dynamic as any one of the other human ones. But again, the planet is very much alive, literally speaking. For each death we see on the screen from both the characters and native animals, and there are a lot, there is a later companion scene depicting a white flower growing from the decaying corpse, life from death. But it's not only symbolism. The flowers are connected to the strange yellow fungus that's growing within Levi. It's how they were infected in the first place. Seemingly, the fungus is able to grant consciousness, implying it has a consciousness of its own. Additionally, it seems to be connected, or at least dispersed throughout the entire planet, as the flowers sprout the same in a wide range of regions. It's the Vestan Gaia, and it expresses its will through Levi, changing them in the process to a supernatural fusion of nature and machine. Through Levi, the planet expresses its displeasure with Hollow, and it exacts judgment by blasting the creature with psychic energy, returning it to its original size and power. Hollow disrupted the delicate balance of life on the planet, and in so doing, upset Vesta itself. So the planet, using Levi as its avatar, restored that balance and ultimately resolved the final conflict in the show with its own agency. That's about as literal and dramatic an example you'll find of a setting directly affecting the plot. Throughout the season, we get these little snapshots of the characters prior to the crash, learning who they were. For instance, Cayman was obsessed with his work, desperate to move up in the corporation, yet too weak-willed and incompetent to actually deliver. The one time he expresses his own agency ends in utter disaster. It's the crash of the Demeter and the death of the woman he loves. So, he doesn't really have a great track record. His journey on Vesta begins in a spacious coffin, trapped inside the escape pod that was supposed to be his salvation. By the time we meet him, he's clearly been in there for weeks, if not months, emaciated after surviving off of what little was stored in the pod, evidence of his failed escape attempts littering the interior. The only reason he doesn't die in that very first episode is because of Hollow's intervention. Now, Hollow is interesting in his own right. It's a creature that subsists off food gathered by hypnotizing smaller creatures into doing the work for it. It's basically a psychic parasite, yet it seems to be relatively harmless at first, just another weight balancing the Vestan ecosystem. At first, Cayman is frightened of Hollow and the power that it has over his mind. It speaks to him through a simulacrum of his dead lover, manipulates what he sees, and even puts him in a sort of trance state. It also feeds him like a baby bird, a very, very disgusting baby bird. According to executive producer Sean Bucklew,
with Hollow, there is a feeling of this thing being neutral. It doesn't have any intent. Typically, in its life cycle, it just brainwashes these little creatures. Hollow has the brain of a squirrel, and these creatures have the brain of a mouse, and that's as advanced as it ever gets. There's a cap on how sophisticated the thing can be, but it has this ability to mind meld with things. When it mind melds with Cayman, who is not only a human with an advanced brain, but is a broken man in a lot of ways, this creature that should have no access to this brain power gets it from a bad source.
Very quickly, Cayman finds the benefits of completely submitting to the will of this creature. It starts with him just finding the same fruit that the buff Gumbies used to provide, but then quickly switches to meat, with Cayman killing larger and larger prey to keep Hollow satiated, and himself, as Hollow feeds Cayman, keeping him under hypnosis, blissfully unaware. The name Hollow is very intentional. The creature is a physical manifestation of Cayman's deep desperation for power, a hollow void that can never be filled. In their AMA, the showrunners stated that
Hollow was inspired by several things, most notably the zombie ant fungus, Baloo from the Jungle Book, and Vor.
Well, that's nice. Wait, what? No matter how big the game, though, it's never enough for Hollow. Cayman commits violent acts in service to him, some that pose a direct danger to his person. He even stands by as Hollow kills a crew member, as his literal ambition killed the other shipmates. For a moment, Cayman was snapped out of his trance by this man, but his despair made manifest wouldn't let him go so easily. Eventually, Hollow completely subsumes Cayman, enveloping him in his own body and replacing any other sense of self that the man may have once had. It makes them powerful, but they're still never satisfied. It's only at the end, after going on a rampage across the planet, that they're finally stopped, literally by a psychic blast that resizes Hollow, but also by being shown that no matter how powerful they are just a small speck on the grand scale of Vesta and its entire history, ultimately meaningless. Cayman's entire story was dictated by Vesta, as he began by giving up agency to Hollow and ended by being dressed down by the planet itself through Levi. Now, Ozzy begins the story as a loner, completely self-sufficient and averse to making human connections. In fact, she met a woman on board the Demeter, but pushed her away before they could get too close because of her antisocial tendencies. When we first meet Ozzy on Vesta, her situation spells out these characteristics, as she has by far the most organized, robust settlement, complete with a garden, a worker robot, a habitat fashioned from the space pod, and even the Tron cycle. Everything is regimented and tightly controlled within the settlement, and she even goes on patrols with Levi to keep out the local fauna. Ozzy tries so hard to maintain a grip on her surroundings, yet over the course of the story, Vesta shows her how counterproductive a mindset like that can be. Really though, her journey begins when the storm forces her out of her zone of control. In order to survive, as we said, she has to learn to go with the flow of Vesta and find her place in the ecosystem. She begins the journey the most prepared of the bunch, with her cycle, radio, and other equipment. However, as she goes on, she must shed more and more of it, the symbols of human supremacy over nature, and simply learn to exist by her own power. In the latter half of the season, she meets the crew of a ship responding to her distress signal, led by Chris. They contrast the person that she has become with the one she set out as, assuming their tech and human intelligence to be enough to keep them safe. But, well... By the time she finally reaches the Demeter, Ozzy has nothing but her wits and her knowledge of how to live within the Vestan ecosystem. She's learned to give up her control, which allowed her to see that she did indeed need help from others, including the woman she'd met on the ship. Levi, on the other hand, takes the plunge fully, integrating themselves with the planet entirely. It's not exactly a choice on the robot's part, since they didn't have autonomy prior to being infected by the yellow fungus, though they do make the choice to retain that change later on. Over the first few episodes, Ozzy shows concern for what the fungus is doing to Levi and makes a few attempts to peer inside and even clean it out of their system. But after saving her from the puffball monster, Levi decides to assert themselves as something other than an appliance for Ozzy to open up and tinker around in. Just like Ozzy, Levi is learning to become a part of the Vestan ecosystem. The difference then is that Ozzy retains her individuality, while Levi fully integrates. After their rebirth by critter incident, the next time we see Levi, they're tending a garden of sorts. The metal shell of their body has been covered over with plant growths, matching the change in their personality. Their hands have turned from clamshells to something all too organic and humanoid. Except where once Levi was bright, optimistic, with a sense of humor, Plant Daddy Levi is detached, calm, and almost indifferent.
Do you know if anyone is still alive on the ship?
I don't. I wish I could help.
They are no longer themselves, instead something new, a synthesis. In a searing moment of awareness, Levi's psychic blast on Cayman shows the entire history of Vesta, from the first moments of the Big Bang through nucleosynthesis to the formation of the accretion disk, which would later birth the planet and all the life it holds. It implies a crafted trajectory, a conscious being that has fully integrated Levi as its avatar, and one that isn't finished. In fact, the final scene of the season shows that Levi's children have escaped the planet, presumably spreading Vesta to other worlds. Just like any of the other 5 main characters, Vesta itself has changed. Vesta plays on deep human fears in multiple different ways, from vicious predators to extreme weather, to the simple fear of being deserted, isolated, alone. Yet I think it's the body horror that stands out here. It just hits different. Body horror is not only the fear of death, that's usually just a byproduct. Arguably worse than that, it's the fear of being invaded, violated, or irrevocably changed somehow. The distortion of the human form into unnatural shapes and movements, the loss of self. It all hits home because we are intimately familiar with what a human body is and isn't supposed to look like. And I can tell you one thing with certainty, it ain't this. Now you may have noticed I didn't include Sam and Ursula in the previous section. We are going to look at their development, but it's only fitting to put them in this section given the absolute f***ed up f***ing shit that they go through. In our first moments with Ursula and Sam, we learn many things. They're both resourceful, they're both driven and knowledgeable. By cobbling together remains of their escape pod and a dash or two of Vestan wildlife, the two of them managed to create a device that would make contact with the Demeter and even call it down to the planet. It does strain credulity a bit, as I mentioned, that they were able to learn about so many useful applications of the wildlife in only a few weeks or months. Like, how in the hell did Sam realize that the innards of that boar creature made glow sticks? Yet, if we accept it, then it's indicative of just how incredible they are. In that first episode, the two of them seek another drop pod to find a replacement battery. Their search leads them to a cave. A very, very bad cave, to use poetic language. Within are the grotesque remains of the drop pod crew, their bodies having been invaded and reshaped by a fungus growing within. They are stark messages showing the horror that results from ignorance and lack of respect for Vesta. Ursula accidentally loses her critter gas mask, and for a tense moment, it seems that she will be joining them. This is the moment that creates a schism between Sam and Ursula's paths. Up to this point, it seemed like he was more the leader, and she was just agreeing with her ship's captain. However, in her near-death experience, Sam's way, TM, is shown to be flawed. It's not that he's done anything wrong to Ursula, but his pig-headedness has consequences, especially in an environment as unforgiving as Vesta. Sam is type A and has some pretty bad tunnel vision. He acknowledges Vesta, but only when he can see it giving him an edge to survive. Anything else is just noise. Time and time again, Vesta shows him how dangerous this mindset is, as it keeps getting him almost killed, with Ursula left to rescue his ass. Yet, he just doesn't learn, at least not until the very end when it's actually too late. This stubborn side of him even contributed to the Demeter's demise almost just as much as Cayman's blind ambition did. Ursula begins that way as well, but as near-death experiences are wont to do, it changes her perspective. Afterwards, she has a much greater respect for Vesta and takes the opportunity to stop and smell the roses, so to speak. Or at least stop and watch the little alien pollinate the roses with a plumbus. Yeah. Later on, Sam is stabbed by the glowing pod plant, and Ursula has to take care of him, as the poison, or infection, whatever, spreads. Eventually, Pod Sam finds them and attempts to do the explosion thing to seed new ground for a new set of pods. The whole incident is peak body horror, taking elements from sci-fi doppelganger classics like Invasion of the Body Snatcher, mixed with the grotesquerie of classical gothic homunculus tales like Frankenstein. Pod Sam's form approximates a human, but on closer inspection looks cobbled together and barely functioning like a monstrosity. It's a reflection of Sam's own single-minded determination, as it literally has a single function. It's also a mockery of his unwillingness to adapt, as the glowing pod literally created within itself a near-perfect adaptation to infiltrate the humans and spread itself. A ridiculously complex, yet effective survival strategy. Even though Ursula saves them by melting the "I can't believe it's not Sam" in a campfire, the real Sam was poisoned when he got stuck by the plant. And this is after she'd already saved him from the windshield reflector creatures, which of course happened because he was once again not paying attention, not giving due respect to his environment. I was trying to think of a good analogy for Sam, but it seems that David Hunter at Collider already beat me to it, so f me, I guess.
Have you ever gone camping with that one friend who gets bitten by all the mosquitoes? Sam is that friend.
Anyways, Ursula manages to find a mysterious, mute old woman out in the wilderness who she hopes will save Sam. It's immediately clear that she wasn't part of the Demeter's crash, that she was there before, even before the flashback. I was expecting Raz from She-Ra when we met her, but instead got the Baba Yaga. She's an example of the solitary sorceress trope commonly found in fantasy, like Hansel and Gretel. And in the same way that sufficiently advanced tech appears like magic, Vesta is pretty damn fantastical, so it fits. For Ursula, seeing the Witch Lady is almost like looking into the future, minus the whole part being controlled by the Cthulhu ficus. At first, the woman seems to be in complete control and in harmony with her environment. Her organic medical table changes shape at the touch, and her hut is filled with Vestan fruits, herbs, and other mysterious items that indicate a deep knowledge of the wildlife. It seems, at first at least, as though her knowledge and respect for the wildlife has afforded her a sort of control over her little corner of the world. Unfortunately for Sam, it turns out that the Witch Lady was a puppet for Treebeard Malamar. And so again, Sam is bitten by a metaphorical mosquito. Or more accurately, a parasitic bean is put inside of him and gives his chest a hitchhiker and an unfortunate escape hatch. The entire time, Vesta has been trying to change Sam, show him the error of his ways. It's like the planet finally just threw up its hands and said, "Fine, I'll make you change." Only problem is that the change leads to his death. Yet, for every horrific constrictor plant or facehugger flying squirrel, there are elements of beauty in Vesta, and these elements are usually shown alongside the horrors to demonstrate the contrast. Establishing shots look like they should be narrated by David Attenborough, just showing off the creative chops of the creature designers. So many little creatures that have zero plot impact, but have the combined effect of making the world feel real and, yes, alive. Just before Terrence is twisted up like the worst kind of soggy pretzel, the forest around them is awash in vibrant neon mushrooms, straw plants, and colorful trees. There is wonder and mystery in many of the interactions on the planet as well. Ditto for the coevolution and symbiosis displayed, as in the pollinator scene, or just before when Ursula unlocks the weird bramble wall. In the former, there are so many questions that are left unanswered, but it absolutely sparks our imagination just as much as it does Ursula's. The biological implications of what must have been the culmination of millions of years of coevolution are just astounding. The plant somehow creates a separate animal, the little green man, for the singular purpose of pollinating itself. Almost like how an ancient eukaryotic cell, our ancestor, likely absorbed a smaller cell at some point and was able to begin reproducing it, using it to its advantage. Fast forward to today when we call it the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. Perhaps the most beautiful moment of the show, though, is the climax of the conflict with Cayman Hollow. The music swells as we see these cosmic images flash on the screen, as the camera circles Levi and Hollow, lit up like a bonfire. It's a majestic display of just how powerful the planet is, as well as a warning against anybody that doesn't respect it. All of these intersperse the more f***ed up moments of Vesta to show that the planet isn't malevolent. It's simply wild, something that should be admired, but also respected and treated with caution.
That's why I always try to pack a gun. I think you're pretty neat, but I respect your distance.
Through this epic man versus nature story of Scavengers Reign, we're asked to observe each of the 5 protagonists' journeys and their interactions with Vesta, and decide for ourselves which one is the correct path. Each of the philosophies represented by the characters have their own strengths and weaknesses. put to the test in conflicts with Vesta and its wildlife, catalyzing change in the characters. Which philosophy is best for them? Which would be best for us? They're nebulous questions, the answers subject to our own ideologies and biases. But this is how they stack up in my eyes. We can immediately discard Cayman's path of submission and subsumption, and Sam's path of sticking his fingers in his ears and going la 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 la, since theirs only led to sad times, mosquito bites, and death. Likewise, Levi's way of integrating with the planet left them with unimaginable power and sentience, but also fundamentally changed who they were. If we followed Levi, would we even be ourselves anymore? Would merging consciousnesses with a living planet uplift or destroy our own? That was 110% rhetorical. So that just leaves Ursula and Ozzy, the two characters that survived Vesta intact, mostly. Notably, their two philosophies both respected the planet and its ecosystem, leaving them more prepared when it threw a curveball. Ursula wants to understand Vesta and dominate it, using it to her advantage. She is the stand-in for the humanist viewpoint. We could argue that humanity has the right of might to dominate nature. The first problem with this is, well, look at what we've done to our own world. Doing the same to Vesta would be a shame, given all the wonder and beauty that is present on the planet. And it begs the question, would conquering such a living, sentient world even be possible in the first place? Ozzy, in contrast, looks to find her place on Vesta, within, not apart from the hierarchy of the ecosystem. This is the ideal environmentalist's viewpoint. Retain oneself while doing as little as possible to disrupt the environment. While Ozzy achieves this for herself, there is a question of whether or not doing so would be possible for a whole society. Most humans are disruptive at the best of times, and we've never been really good at living within the bounds of nature en masse. Again, look at our own planet. It was only in the interactions with a place as creative and diverse as Vesta that these questions, and the arguments for them, could be teased out. Just like with The Shining, replacing Vesta with another alien world wouldn't have resulted in the same impact on the viewer. The planet is a setting that forces change on others, changes itself, affects a myriad of emotions in the characters, directly influences the plot, etc. Thus, for all intents and purposes, the planet itself is a character, perhaps the main character of Scavengers Reign.
How neat is that? That's pretty neat.
Now, I was going to end there. During the writing of the script, Max did what Max does best and announced that the reign is over. The show will not be getting a second season on the platform. However, it's also being released on Netflix as well, so there is speculation that they may decide to pick it up. I genuinely hope that they do, though, because the imagination shown in making Vesta come alive is truly awe-inspiring, and that's saying nothing about the impactful themes and three-dimensional characters explored within. We need more thought-provoking adult animation like this, so please, Netflix, do your thing. You know, the green light everything thing, not the cancel amazing shows after the first season thing, or demonetize my videos even though they're fair use of your content thing. As always, thanks so much for your support, and I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully this one does not get demonetized, but if it does, you can always follow the link at the end to my Patreon and subscribe if you really enjoy my content. Otherwise, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.